Dotiv, Integrative and Preventive Healthcare. The content discussed in this episode is for informative purposes only
and should not be replaced by individualized professional consultations or professional medical advice.
Hey guys, I'm Tasha.
Hey listeners, this is Goonie, and we're here to discuss lifestyle medicine.
About 5 years ago, when I was working in consulting, like a larger company, and I was feeling super lost and I couldn't find my way out. I was scared to make a decision to move forward and just leave something that was familiar to me and was familiar to the people around me as well. And they're just like, this is the right choice for you because it's a safe choice, right? And I'm just like, oh my God, am I in the same position that I was 5 years ago? How do I get out of this?
Being Asian in a good job and I say good, air quoting it,
branded
in a large
company.
Large consulting company, looks and sounds good, and you don't want to disappoint your parents, your family, and how would it look like if you failed or whatever, or if you change. That's definitely a big deal. And the fear of change was very similar to mine when I was working for this corporate. I managed to go up the rank, and it's like, why would you change or leave a position where you're paid well, you have that recognition? When they tell you, why would you change? It's like financial commitments, family commitments, you have contribute to a certain household, or even to yourself, like to be able to be self-sufficient. These are all factors that you have to key in and contributes to the confusion or the decision of change, right? Like, should I change jobs? Should I move? What's the right move to do?
Yeah, and I don't know if you had work-life balance. I mean, it's such a trending term, right? But couldn't see a life outside of just working, or it was always extremes, like working madly and long hours, and then crashing from that, and then finding like something crazy to give me energy, going out for parties or drinking, and it was always one extreme to the other, and I couldn't cope with that anymore, and the transition of that was I needed to make a decision.
Yeah, and you don't want to make a change that reckless, that you didn't go through a thought process or a methodical way to go about it. Because, I mean, the reason why you're unhappy could be about, your work environment, having a toxic workplace. But if we remove that and it's more a personal aspiration issue, which is, this job doesn't bring me satisfaction. What is my next step? What is it that I want to, brand myself like? What is the next best step for me in terms of my aspiration, my values, what I want to develop myself in, the skills that I need, that exercise and that work that you need to put in can be daunting.
And I think that's probably why it's good to have someone we can actually get some I guess feedback. Maybe you can tell us yourself, Rachel, who's our, I guess, friend now, but also a branding consultant and yoga instructor, who might have some.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a background where I've constantly been told that I needed to define my skills, expertise, strength, weaknesses, and I spent the most part of my early career trying to define that in the perspective of people I worked for, right? But then as I grew older, I realized that there was a lot of limitation in trying to shape my career around what people expected of me versus what I felt resonated most with the person I am. So as a branding consultant, I come across people who, are either at turning points of their career where they want to make that leap and maybe shift from more corporate-like environments to something more startup or entrepreneurial, or even individuals who perhaps just finished their studies and they're about to embark on a whole new journey into a whole new career. That's probably the two most prominent times that a person would come to me to ask, like, hey, how should I define myself, right? And I always find it interesting when a person comes to me for that, because the truth is you can't really find it from another person, right? Like I'm merely here to be a mirror and perhaps a safe space or a soundboard for the person to vent and hear themselves out. But I don't know, I think a lot of times it's helpful as like an anchor, but a lot of the inquiry or answers comes from within. And this is something that I've learned.
That sounds like me when I decided to do my MBA. Great career. And I was thinking, this is not it for me. I need to change. I had a sense that it was an entrepreneurship, but I was not sure how, etc. And so I think this is why people do MBAs, because they don't know what to or how to go about that next step.
That's me too.
And so you would ask, exactly as you said, Rachel, you would have either people who are already in that career that want to go up the ladder and they are trying to get that MBA, or it's people like me who want to do a shift to another industry or another role. That's where it becomes scary, because it's like, oh, I have not been trained for this, or I don't have the skills set for it right now. And so you basically do an MBA to figure that out within a year minimum. Sometimes it's 2 years, but not everyone has the means to do an MBA and figure that out. Of course, like I'm not trying to reduce an MBA to having a break to figure your life out, because of course there's like an institution behind, there's a curriculum behind, but these are some of the reasons that people do an MBA.
And I think I resonate with that. We're so privileged, right? We live in a generation where education is abundant. Things like MBA or like post-university courses online, knowledge is everywhere. And honestly, they say like the world is your oyster. It's literally that right now. And I think because of that, it's so overwhelming for us. Like we're given this opportunity to choose. Hey, there is this possibility that you can shape the kind of life that you've always imagined or dreamed of. But it's kind of up to you to decide what that would look like. And I think this is where the fear comes, because we're so conditioned in a way, whether it's our upbringing, our families, or our culture, like we have these preconceptions on what adulthood or life should look like. And unpacking that or deconditioning from that is a lot for us, you know? And it comes with basic things, like you said, like we all need to survive. We all need basic means to support ourselves, to sustain ourselves. And I think this is like the bare minimum a person would have to think of when it comes to like shaping this whole brand for themselves. It's not just about what you want, but it's also like that element of survival. We still need to eat, we still need to live, and we still want to go places, do things. And therefore, there's a lot to think about.
Definitely. And because there's a cost to that brand or to that life that you want for yourself. And sometimes we idealize whatever we have, the picture that we have in mind of, say, you want to go into entrepreneurship, you think it's this glamorous thing, but it's not. It's hard work, a lot of sacrifices, and you need to be okay with that. And it doesn't have to, it shouldn't feel as sacrifices, but you have to understand that you might have to go to that extent.
Yeah. And what you were saying, Rachel, like a lot of the constructs that we have and the kind of the barriers that we experience is from our environment, our upbringing, right? So personally for you, when you were in your, I guess, early marketing branding journey, what were your fears, or like what were your challenges before you could decide this is how I can actually transition from here to the next place? And what do you think was the push for you to get to that point?
I love your question. I grew up as the black sheep in my family, Malaysian, Chinese upbringing. So there was a lot of expectation around me being that Chinese daughter who would achieve, I don't know, certain types of career levels, such as be a lawyer, be an accountant, be, I don't know, a doctor.
I know the other two. Doctor, engineer.
Yeah, I got sent to piano school. Like I got told to do all these things, but I could never do it till the end. I was always quitting. I was always giving up, and for the longest time, I felt like there was something wrong with me. But I persevered, right? Of course, I had moments where I was like a rebel. I was breaking the rules. I was going against what my parents wanted from me, and it extended until I graduated, and then I became an adult and I needed to work. Like the pattern continued, right? I just couldn't fit in to whatever box that was expected of me. And it was hard because I had to disappoint my parents, right? Like I had to turn around and tell them like, no, I'm sorry, this is what I want to do, or this is the choice that I want to make. And they needed time to accept that part of me. When they finally did was the point where they gave up, right? They no longer gave me their feedback. They no longer said like, they no longer gave me advice on what to do. They just sort of like sat there quietly and waited for me to tell them what I'm up to, you know? So I think it took a lot of courage to just continue on this path where I wanted to do things differently, but everyone else around me was telling me that I was doing it wrongly, you know? And so to answer you, like in terms of career, I was working like the regular job. I was working for people and I was working in corporate. I started off as a journalist, and then I became a marketing exec, and then I became a marketing manager, and I did climb that ladder for a while, right? But then for that period of me working for others within the system, within a city, within the organization, I had this inkling feeling that forever crept behind my head whenever I woke up. I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be here. You know, I just wanted to escape. I wanted to be somewhere else. I didn't want to be where I was. And it was exhausting, right? Because as soon as I felt settled, as soon as I knew that this was something that I'm good at, I would reach a point where I just want to go away, you know? So that turning point for me was recognizing that pattern. There was something wrong with me doing things for other people. And so I took a break. I took a massive sabbatical, couple of versions, but one of the versions were the 2 months
like
version. There were several versions. And I vouch for this. For anyone that's looking to shift their career, sabbaticals is everything. They don't teach you that in school. In fact, they tell you stay in school. But some of my light bulb moments, my epiphanies came from sabbaticals, you know, because I created that space in order for me to think, to move away from everything and to basically, gain perspective and insight.
Yeah, the stigma around sabbatical is horrible, especially in the Asian community. It's like, oh, okay, so you're basically going to do nothing. That's
and
what you want
also,
to do.
they think that sabbaticals are only allowed for people who are in like their 50s when you've deserved or earned it, you know?
Which
like,
doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Because the 20s, early 20s, or this is where you're figuring out life, having that year to figure things out, planning that year in a way that, you know, you're creating opportunities for you to discover what is it that you want. And as you said, it can look in so many different forms. And just going back to my example, I guess my MBA was my sabbatical in some way, an expensive sabbatical year.
But, you know, like even when you were referencing earlier, Rachel, like that the fact that we have ample of choices, like it's an abundance of it, right? I think that's also, for me, I feel like it cripples me as well, because I love trying everything. And so there is an innate interest or curiosity in things, right? But it takes me a while to figure out if this is my thing or not. And so I think that kind of feeling or essence does exist for a lot of people as well, where they just want to figure out, they're just curious to know whether this is something that will work. But it's scary to take that leap of faith and say like, I'm just going to try it. And even if it fails, it doesn't matter. Like that mindset, and the word you used earlier is courage, like having that courage to just disappoint the people around you who have been expecting a lot from you, having that courage to just say no, and like sitting with that discomfort when they are disappointed with you. It's very, very confronting.
If that's absolutely. I hear you. And I think it comes from this notion where most of our lives growing up, I realized that I was so concerned about what other people thought about me, or about what others were thinking, when I hit my 30s and then realized that was all wrong, right? I never needed to care about what people thought about me. In fact, what was most important was what I thought about myself. And so this thing about us taking sabbaticals or creating space, or whether taking an MBA, gives us that space and time to reflect. which is such a luxury these days. We're so used to being wired and to being productive at all times. We need to be efficient. We need to seize our potential. Go, 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 go. And so at what point do we pause and reflect, right? And I think most people who are struggling to figure out their brand don't have that opportunity to pause, really, because we're put in this framework or in this period of time where we're pressured to make a decision. And because it's so compact, like we're kind of rushing through thoughts, you know, and our thoughts are scattered. And I wouldn't say like the quality of our thoughts are the most, I don't know, the most reflective of what our true self is, or the authentic self. We read a lot about this, right? The authentic self, the who you are. It's really hard to figure out what that is. And yet most self-help books or personal development journeys would tell you that we need to reconnect with self. And I think this is something that is, I don't know, I think a lot of people are on this journey right now towards figuring out what that looks like. And I think that is actually one of the most important things when it comes to shaping your personal brand, getting to know yourself. And I tie this back to my interests and passion in the world of yoga, in this path of yoga. I learned this word self-study or self-inquiry, right? Which I think if anyone who does yoga here would know that as one of the basic words, and it's called swadhyaya, right? And when my teacher first taught me that during yoga philosophy classes, I was like, oh wow, like we grew up studying subjects as though it was external, whereas like there was the biggest subject, which was within us, that no one told us that we needed to study this subject, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, what? I'm mind blown, you know? As in, how could this? How are we in education systems that don't tell us that we need to study ourselves? And so, yeah, knowledge is not just what we experience externally, but it's got a lot to do with how we perceive it and how we experience it within.
100%. It's the time when I paused where I realized or recognized how, I think the whole time, even in my first consulting job, I felt this constant pressure to like have it all known already, and constant narrative around me. It's like, why don't you know this already? You should already know yourself by now. And I'm like, when did I have the chance or the opportunity to figure that out? Like, I was just jumping from one, I had to finish high school, then go to college. And once you're in college, you just have to go straight into a job. There's no room for you to figure that out. And even in that stage, you can't necessarily figure yourself out because you are developing and all the pieces are coming together. And we are still obviously a work in progress until the day we die. But I think that pressure of having people ask you questions about yourself and you don't have the answers, I always felt like, wait, something is wrong with me. Why don't I have the answers? And I thought that people around me knew that. And only during COVID, because I had the space, like, and not the noise around me, to just sit with myself and to come to the point to say like, crap, actually, I don't know this about myself. And being okay with the I don't know was open to be created. I can just figure out if I want to be this or that, or if I do like this or that. But to come to that point was, I don't know, like 30 years of my living. But at the same time, I realized that many people don't know themselves at all. They're just going around like making it up as they go along.
Or they don't. And then they hit a wall, and it happens unfortunately, sometimes in a very drastic way, and they are forced to look at themselves in some shape or form. But yeah, I totally resonate as well, Rachel. And I feel that this all happens around your 30s, this epiphany, which we're saying, it requires a lot of courage to, first of all, say, okay, I don't know, and I'm going to figure this out. And I'm going to prioritize this because this is important. That requires a lot of courage when you live in a society that tells you what is important is how much you earn and what do you own, and you know, who do you hang out with, what is your net worth, and all that. In a career, so I didn't have a moment where I was like, I have to now do some self-introspection, but I felt the need to break free from, you know, this wagon. So I was like, oh no, I need to just to jump off this for a second, and then I want to explore this. And I didn't realize that me exploring that was the beginning of a journey of self-exploration. But retrospectively, my MBA was my sabbatical.
Of course, I think there's value in being in school, being a part of the education system, because it gives us like a compass to understand what's our strength, what's our weakness, our skills, our expertise, what are we good for, how can we serve this world, right? So all those like surface level general questions are answered thanks to us committing to this path of education. But then I think the additional work after, which is the hardest work, right, is how do we want to decide on how we want to show up for ourselves and for those around us and for this short period of time that we're here on Earth, right? And that sounds a little bit morbid, but I mean, that's always how I think these days. I'm like, time is so limited. And, personal brand, yeah, sure, it's about reputation, how people perceive you, but then it's got a lot to do with your intention as well, which is, what's your intention here? Is it because you expect X and X from this path, or is it because you know that this is important to you and therefore you're going to continuously show up for it because it's just what you believe in, right? And I think having this sense of purpose, right? We talk a lot about purpose, but if you were to look into the word purpose, right, it's quite vast and complex because purpose changes from moment to moment. Like we may have a purpose at one point, but then as human beings, we're so organic and we're constantly changing. So how do we, become fixated on one purpose? So I think it also comes with like self-knowledge also comes with this ability to become more agile and adaptive with the changes that are happening on the moment to moment, right? We can use our purpose as a way of giving us direction towards our goals, our vision. We want to achieve things, of course, and that's okay to want things. But then to what extent do we, harp on our wants to the point that we are compromising other things that are being damaged within us, right? So, I mean, Tasha, you talk about work-life balance. Why is it trending right now? Big question, no? Like, as society now, we suddenly realized that it wasn't feasible for us to go on this extreme path of either or. There's this sense of alignment or balance that needs to come in order for us to continue surviving in this world. What do you guys think about this work-life balance element? Is it, because some people say it's a fallacy, like it doesn't exist, or it's just like a trend,
Yeah, about this work-life balance. Yesterday, I was discussing with an older couple. They are in their 50s, 60s, and they were contrasting to their way of approaching work to our generation, to my generation and the generation younger, saying that we are, the snowflake generation where we can't take hardship and we're not resilient. For a little thing, we need a break, or, we want to draw lines and protect our well-being. I mean, for them, they've made it they sound a bit worse, but they just they say, well, we played it hard, we had to work hard, and that's the only way to go about things. And then I challenged them and I said, what is the point? What is that indicator that will tell you that this is where I have to draw the line where work stays or is work and I have to put it aside? And he was like, well, there's no line, like there's no blur, like it's all into one. Because I work with one of them and I said, well, when you had that medical condition, was that a wake-up call for you? And then he said, well, yes. And so this is where, you can tell that it's the work-life balance. I don't think that it's, a distinct line where this is work and this is my life, because like most of our time awake is spent at work. So I do think that there's some synergies and we can't like draw the line, but we need to be better at identifying when is it that we have to deassociate a bit and go back to ourselves and our well-being.
Yeah, I feel like the older generation, I mean, I can't say for all, but like I feel that generally they have like a bitterness that we are trying to prioritize this way of living because we've seen how it's clearly not a healthy pattern of living. And I see, like, even my dad last year, he had a bypass. And I'm like, it obviously, it goes somewhere, the stress, the pressure of it, for whatever he's achieved, great stuff. But who ended up suffering for that? It's also the person that's carrying the burden. So I don't want to end up there. And I think our generation sees that as a concerning point, right? But back to your question, Rachel, is like, I see the importance in having a balance. And also to what Guni said, I don't see them as separate. Your work is part of your life, it's a subsection. It's not work and life separately. But we need to find the line to say, like, okay, this is a healthy amount where I need to prioritize, or this is when I need to slow down, because other things in my family side or my social circles take priority. Like, if my best friend's getting married, like I need to show up and be there for that, not just be with my job, that sort of mindset. It takes a lot of understanding and self-awareness so that you can find how to split yourself accordingly, because as you said, time is limited, our energy is also limited, and we also need to have that space and capacity to figure out where it is we want to direct ourselves, right? So I see that as an important factor, and that's why I think we do this.
So Rachel, I have a question for you. So understanding that, okay, work-life balance is something that we need to figure out, and that will be shaped in some way. But I also feel that if you're working with purpose and intention, and if you figured that out, that balance feels it's easier. But if we try to unpack that, definition, or working on the path towards purpose, like, how do we measure that? Is there a way for us to get to that understanding of purpose for ourselves?
It's a good question. So once upon a time, I came up with this framework together with my business partner, and it was for us to do training sessions with individuals or groups who were trying to define their personal brands. And so we call it the personal brand orbit. Sounds a bit floaty, but
love the conviction.
I like it, and I want to know more. Please tell us what it is.
So the personal brand orbit is basically our way of saying, in order for you to have an effective strategy on how you represent yourself or how people perceive you, you need to have a combination of having clarity in what you stand for, to knowing who you want to engage with, and where you intend to communicate. So this is tapping a little bit more into the professional side. Like, yes, we want to define ourselves, but it's also about who we're speaking to, right? And this is probably more relevant for someone who's trying to perhaps sell a product or promote a service. It really depends on the field that you're in, right? And this is why our roles and responsibilities are good indicators to, I hate to say this, but our key performance index, right? If we were to be a little bit more structured about it, we all have goals, we all have objectives. So I think if I were to answer you, like, what are the metrics in order for us to know that we've nailed our personal brand, like, it's on point and it's so aligned and people get us. I think it comes from the context. It depends. So for example, if I were to look at myself, I branded myself as a branding consultant, a marketer, a mentor, as well as a yoga instructor. And because over the years, I found the courage to define myself outside of that box and to no longer limit myself as a marketing communications manager or lead, right? I noticed that I started to attract like specific kinds of leaders or people who wanted to work with me, not just because I knew marketing, but because I was somehow having this whole discourse about the self or personal development. They were somehow open to having conversations aside from work because they knew that they could talk about non-work related matters. So for me, that was an indicator that, okay, I think I've nailed my personal brand, because like the kind of people that resonated with the way I present myself was starting to gravitate towards me. Or I don't know, when I start to experience people behave differently towards me is one of the metrics I would say in personal branding. But to go back to the personal brand orbit, there's basically a few frameworks that we provide. And we get people to sit down with us and do like journaling, reflective activity based on a few pillars. And it starts with the foundation of your being, which is the essence of your identity. And this is not just the identity of how people perceive you, but how you perceive yourself. And then it's like thinking of you walking into the room for the first time. And what's the first impression that someone would have when they experience you or when they see you? So when I do this activity with people, I don't just ask them like, what do they think people would think? I also try to get them to put themselves as part of the audience. So it becomes them detaching from what other people think about them, but also putting them as part of the experience. So of course, it requires time to journal, to write, to reflect, but there's definitely a lot of value when it comes to doing written activities like this. It's like morning pages or journaling, but very specific questions that you ask yourself.
I really like that exercise because it gives you the opportunity to create how you want people to perceive you and how you want to be, how you want to feel about it. And I think that's very empowering because you're the one who's holding the pen of how you want your essence to be perceived and felt. And I think that it's a really empowering first step in that process.
It's about the story we tell others and the story we tell ourselves. It's about building narratives because at the end, branding is that, guys. I mean, branding is all about narratives, stories we tell others, story we tell ourselves. So what's the message there, right? What are we trying to say to people, or more importantly, to the inner self, to the inner voice, you know? So that's just the first two steps, essence, identity, but it goes into this full orbit where by the end of it, it talks about like, what will it take for you to experience growth in a way that you envision yourself, right? Because we don't just talk about your essence, we talk about the vision, the goals, or where you see yourself. And then we also talk about your values, your principles. What do you believe in, you know? So it's sort of a parameter to unpack like the different elements, not just within ourselves, but also externally in terms of the kind of actions that we want to take every day towards the kind of person that we imagine ourselves to be in, I don't know, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line. And I think it's a beautiful activity for anyone that wants to do personal branding.
Yeah, I think it sounds very much like an exercise one of my life coaches asked me to do. But I think coming to the point where you feel like you're confident or you have clarity about the kind of person you want to be, that is maybe one step ahead. If people who don't even have that clarity, so I guess what would you say would be a step for them to do before they come to that point where they feel like they can start that journey?
That's such a tough question, but I hear you. I'll say what I say to my team members because they're all much younger, and you know, when I talk about clarity or purpose, they look at me like, what in the world are you talking about? But I'll tell them indicators. Say, I think Guni asked me about metrics and indicators. Noticing your feelings and your behavior. For example, like when you're assigned a task and it takes you forever to complete it, right? So I tell them to observe the way they do things, because it's in that process that you start to realize like what's weighing you down or what's easier for you to do. Some tasks you do it really fast, whereas some tasks, you know, you'll keep what's that word?
Procrastinating.
Procrastination. Procrastination is the number one tool, I think. I mean, of course, it's a common human behavior, but I think that's one of, we can call it like, oh, we're just not in the mood, but actually it's because we're like sucked in to this void of like otherness that we can't be in the present. And so I think noticing how you perform your tasks or how you show up at work or family or friends is like one of the biggest indicators to whether or not things are aligned for you. Feelings of dissatisfaction or disappointment or even misery or fear. I mean, those we can pull them all under one negative emotion, but I think for a lot of us, that's what weighs us down, right? And then we only categorize joy and happiness into like one big bubble. But then so I think checking in with yourself is definitely the first thing I would say for anyone. before even talking about clarity, because if you can't be honest about how you're feeling, or even have the ability to recognize that something is wrong, something feels not right, then it's really hard for you to think about how do we clarify, how do we find, I don't know, perspective when you didn't even know something was wrong. So does that make sense to you guys? I mean, clarity is such a big word. I wish we could all see it, but we don't even know we need clarity.
Procrastination is definitely a thing to tell you, hey, what's going on? It doesn't necessarily mean that what you're doing is not for you. Sometimes I feel procrastination is just if you're doing creative work, is that there's something that needs to come through. So, but you need to feed in so that light bulb moment just comes through. But sometimes procrastination is really that you are trying to avoid that task like the plague, and then that it means that there is strong. Like something. But what I mean is that procrastination is the beginning of unpacking what's going on, right? It could just be you having a creative block, or it could be you really having a blockage around the actual work or the actual environment in which you are. And that's why I like what Rachel is saying, is that it's the beginning of identify that something's, you need to explore what's going on so that you can get to clarity and unpack, okay, what is it that really I'm trying to run away from?
I think we get very comfortable with dwelling because we get so used to it. And that's why I vouch for sabbaticals, because those are the moments that you get uncomfortable and you put yourself in situations where, oh, whoa, I need to survive. I need to adapt. I need to be on my toes because I'm not in an environment that I'm used to. So yeah, it's not an easy thing. Most of us don't realize that we're dwelling, and that's okay. And if I were to tie it back to my experience, right? Okay, I'm older, and I wouldn't say I'm wiser, because I always tell my friends, the more I know, the more I feel like I don't know.
Yes.
And I'm just bogged down with that realization. Like, the more I know, the more I study, the more I'm like, holy moly, I just don't know anything. And that's fine. But in the context of my career, I think I'm a lot more aware of like these triggers or like aha moments when something's not working for me. So, for example, yes, now I started my own company. I started to work for myself. I built my own team because I realized that working for others just wasn't working for me. But then once you get what you want, or you begin to align with your purpose, suddenly, the mind wanders, and then you'll come across moments where like, oh, the grass is greener on the other side, right? Should I be going back to a corporate job because it's easier? Or should I be taking a step back because like I should start a different thing? So I recently realized that I wasn't as passionate about providing like marketing service for my clients anymore, at least in the context of like agency work, right? Because I just felt like everything I said, I wasn't believing what I was saying. Like, in fact, I felt like I was hoaxed, right? So this is like imposter syndrome, right? Like when you start to hear yourself, you're like, hold up, like you're not even believing what you're saying, but you're playing the role anyway. And because I used to do theater, I'm like, you know what, put up the face, just go on stage and play the role, And I think for me, those are the indicators where like, okay, something needs to shift, or like I need to work harder to figure out what that divergent might look like, and just like do it, make that decision, right? So I did tell my business partner like maybe a year plus ago, I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to slow down on agency work because it's just not resonating with me, or I want to be very selective with the kind of businesses I work with, because I wasn't sure if I was aligned with their values. And I think this goes back to personal brand. Like when you know your values, what you believe in, you will naturally start to decide who you want to work with, who you want to work for, and what you want to work for, like because you believe in it. And I think that makes it easier when it comes from a place that it makes sense for you.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you. Maybe one of your values is money. Maybe one of your value is that, and it doesn't mean that that's wrong. It's just you identifying that that's important to you. Then that's going to drive your decisions of who you're going to, mingle with, who are you going to start working with, because that's what you value. one looks very aspirational and one sounds maybe materialistic, but it's what's common to both is that you've identified that this is what you value the most, and there's no judgment about what it says about you or how it looks like.
Yeah, it's very nice and refreshing to hear this spoken out loud, because it's making me realize, like, even though I haven't necessarily put down certain things as my values, I've already been acting in that way. So my choice of not working with certain types of companies or like certain work cultures, it is a value that is driving that actually. I didn't realize that because I didn't actually put it down on paper, right?
It's your inner wisdom speaking and doing for you.
Yes. So you were saying about like the exercise to do. Once you do this exercise, like, are there any other tools for people to kind of connect back their personal branding to how they can achieve the type of life that they want, the work-life balance or professional well-being?
I think, yes, the personal brand orbit is a good starter towards at least clarifying your career choices or journey. Whereas on a day-to-day, this is my personal experience at least, practices or rituals that keeps me grounded or aligned has helped me a lot, like yoga, meditation, or mindfulness. And I continue doing it because it helps me in this path towards getting to know myself. And what's more important is it helps me become more firm with the way I do things and become more certain about my decisions. I guess because I've always been one of those person that was doubtful, fearful, or worried about what others may think. And yet, as an individual, as a being, I knew that I was just different. I don't know why, I just am. And I think doing things like movements or breathing or taking that 5 minutes every morning is just little efforts I can do to love myself more, or to at least hear myself out a little bit more. And one of the subjects that I'm most interested in my yoga studies is actually about the mind. And I know we learn this a lot through practice in meditation, but I also try to study it from a theoretical point of view, because I start to realize that a lot of our limitations or possibilities are dictated by the mind, right? And what is the mind? So many different teachings tell you different things. But because I do Ashtanga and I study a lot of Patanjali, which is like basically one of the teachings of the yoga practice, and he says that there's 7 types of minds, right? And I've only studied the first 2 minds, and I haven't even gone to the 5th mind. But the first 2 minds was basically telling me that there is the wandering mind and there's the fixated mind. And then there's that space in between the wandering and the fixated mind, which is where yoga comes, which is the union, the yoke, right? The moment of presence. And I think in order for us to access this space and moment, we really need to explore different ways that will allow us to get there. And it doesn't have to be that, right? It doesn't have to be yoga, meditation, mindfulness. It could be like you cooking over the evening, or taking a walk, walking your dog, or taking a drive. Mindfulness means different things for us. And when I talk about mindfulness, again, let's unpack that. Like, different people would say it's about noticing the self, noticing the sound, sight, smell, just coming to terms with where you are right now as it is. And I think the more that we can train ourselves to be in the present as if it was a muscle, the better we will be in whatever that we decide for ourselves in everyday life, you know? So
yeah, I love that. It's the discipline. I really resonate with discipline. If you know me a little bit, you know that the meditation, the presence, the moments of presence, or those practices of giving the opportunity of noticing and being present is running, is swimming, and is also to sit down and just breathe, because that comes from my heritage as well. But you're right. That's the only thing you can be in control of, which is being in the present and noticing. And that will bring you to your truth, or what is your next step, or how to go about things in life. Because if I don't have those moments, I just go about my life and the noise just takes over. I notice that when I don't do that, I am a mess. It's horrible. I'm going through this sheep type of mentality, and you just continue and you just do the work, and then you end up at the end of the day a bit numb. And that is where you're like, oh, you've wasted a day with, and you've not taken the time to notice. So I think that practice, again, it doesn't have to look like you being in lotus pose, and it can be what it's supposed to be for you. Be a walk. It could be even sometimes pooping is it's cathartic.
Sleep is meditation as well. I read that somewhere.
Exactly.
But it's true, you know. Okay, I know this is gross, but the pooping part, like a lot of us, and I like it. I actually had to actively try that. Like sometimes I take the phone to the toilet, and then I'm like, why do I need my phone in the toilet? What is so important that I need to look at my phone? Like, can't I just be present here? Like, I actually really enjoy my showers, and like when I have a shower, I'm just like, this is so nice. I'm like really enjoying the water and stuff. And I'm like, I should do this when I poop as well.
Tell you, game changer.
Game changer indeed. And I'm so conscious about like what happens, because I read these things where they say the particles travel in the air, and if you have your phone nearby, so then every time I take my phone to the bathroom, I have to wipe it down. I'm like, this is a lot of effort.
What?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Lord,
the particles
okay.
travel when you flush, and it's like
Particles of what? Oh, of your poop.
Yeah, onto the phone, and then you have your phone everywhere.
The phone. I mean, are you sure? Okay,
yes,
fine. Okay,
and listen, that's what they said. Our
it.
handphones are the most disgusting to. It's like sometimes more dirtier than like a bathroom floor.
Yeah.
So
okay.
You know,
Okay,
just saying.
on that
That's
note,
why you
I'm
gotta
gonna
wipe down your phone.
clean my phone right now.
I have my antibacterial wipes nearby. Anyway,
Advice of the day:
we digress.
clean your phone.
But it's true. I agree with both of you. I resonate with what you said, Rachel. Like the daily routines, I've really made an effort over the last 10 months to make sure that is a practice, because I somewhere in between after COVID, I lost the rhythm to that, because I was losing myself in my days and feeling grounded in myself. And even now, it's like a constant practice of figuring out the balance. I try to train jujitsu in the morning so that I actually get that fitness part in my day started, so that I feel clear in my mind. But the days I don't do it in the morning, I feel really off. And then I'm like, okay, if I don't do something in the evening, I'm definitely going to feel the repercussion of this the next day. For me, I find the fitness, the movement part a critical factor.
Great. Everyone needs to find their own recipe to what works for you.
Especially given your environment as well, because sometimes you can have kids and you need to wake up in the morning, and being present might look unattainable, but you can factor that in if you prioritize it. But it's easier said than done.
For sure.
But you're the only one who would know what is best for you. I think that really wrapped up our conversation on the topic of how do we attain professional well-being and personal branding, because it's very much interlinked. And I really like to thank you, Rachel, for that. But before we let you go, we have rapid fire questions for you. And the first question is, could you name a pivotal moment in your life where personal branding impacted you in a major way?
Yes, I wrote this down, and I'm going to say this again. One of the versions of my sabbatical, I think it was the version where I backpacked around Europe for 2 months. Like, I was one of those on the street hitchhiking. It was after I quit my job, of course. I quit my job. I was like, I'm going to go for a 2 month trip, and then I'm going to decide on my next step. And in that 2 months being out there with a very heavy backpack, which I will never carry now anymore, because now I'm all about wheels. But the younger self loves
Love it.
all about wheels. Whoever says backpacking, no way. Give me the wheels.
You've upgraded in life.
I have grown up. I've evolved. I'm all about comfort, health. My spine hurts. Give it to me. Wheels. So I was in a whole new environment, and I think from all those external experiences was when I decided I was going to move to Bali. I was going to leave KL and move to Bali. And this has been the narrative of how people perceive me for the past 10 years. And it was also the same time that I decided to start my own business and no longer work for a person. That's definitely one of the recent pivotal moments for me.
Nice. So go travel, people. The second
or do
question...
an MBA.
Yes, that too.
Just make sure you have enough in your bank account. Because I don't know if I would recommend it to everyone, but it's one option.
And the second question is, what's one thing you would like to detach from?
I would like to detach from attachment. I mean, it's such a cliche, but really, I want to detach from attachments. And it's because the older I get, the more I'm convinced that anything can change at any time in any way. And this leaves me with a lot of uncertainties, yet possibilities, right? So I'm trying to become more mindful when my mind takes over, right? I'm like, okay,
Yes.
I see you, but I should have that ability to just kind of take a step back and become a spectator of my thoughts and know that it's probably me trying to think about the past or the future, and I think I'm constantly in that mode. I'm constantly living for the future, for the past, and if I could detach from that attachment, then I think I would be a better version of myself, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, you say it sounds cliche, but if you actually know what attachment means, like what are the layers, it's such a layered and complex phenomena. Just achieving that is actually huge and very difficult. So yeah, I think that I share similar. I would want to detach as well, but it's very difficult.
It's
Last
impossible.
question for you.
It's impossible, but we try.
Except if I become, I don't know, maybe if I become a nun or something like that,
exactly.
maybe that would work.
If I was, meditating,
But I don't think it
mountain,
guarantees that, like, even if you become a nun, it's just a title. You still have to do the work and
yeah,
go
but
through
it's
the
like
process.
You're putting yourself. Yeah, exactly. The thing is that you're kind of, okay, I don't want to be disrespectful for nuns, but or even whoever's choosing that, but you're kind of cheating because you're deciding to put yourself away from society and create an environment where where you're controlling those the possibility of you to attach. So meaning, say you have kids or etc., then you're saying, okay, I'm deciding to detach myself from society. So that's already kind of taking, I think, a bit of a shortcut. But they might be a bit happier than us. I don't know.
Or a spiritual path. Wish them well.
Yes, exactly. And so last question for you. Is there a lesson around personal branding, professional well-being that you keep having to relearn?
Yes, I think what I need to keep relearning is that change is permanent. I seem to notice more theoretical than practically. And this means that I still get caught in the loop of comfort or complacency, and then I'm consciously putting myself in the illusion of being in this lull. I'm not saying I'm not happy with what I'm doing, but I want to be able to notice when actually something's not working for me anymore. And I say this knowing that we're beings that are going through phases of aging, growing, dying, whatever. So there are phases, right? And I want to be able to, I don't know, evolve into these phases more fully and wholly. It's not just about survival, I think. I know we need to survive, but I would like to be more confident about the kind of world that I choose to live in. So yeah, just change is permanent. And I think I still need to relearn that, even though I know it.
Yeah, that's a really meaningful perspective and take, Rachel. And yeah, I'm really, really happy that we had this conversation and we could contextualize feeling lost in a very positive thing as well, because that means there are tools to finding a new path forward. So I'm grateful and thankful that we spoke about this.
Thanks, Rachel, for joining us in that conversation. And of course, we'll give all the information for our listeners to reach out to you, to get to know you as well.
Thank you, ladies. I love what you're doing. Dotiv is amazing. I love it too.
Thanks, Rachel.
If you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and select that follow or subscribe button.
Till then, stay well.